Well, you can just edit the heck out of it. This I do weddings, so I know.
Uh, yeah, that's a pretty good start. Yeah, so I guess desperate times call for desperate measures, and this in this unprecedented time, I'm talking to Andrew Hutchison. So, how's life? How are things going?
Well, things are obviously very different in my personal life. Both myself and my wife are still able to work, so we're very fortunate in that way. Um, uh, I'm working mostly at home, and Jen is working at home all the time, but we also have both of our kids at home, and that's a bit of a challenge. So, two jobs plus looking after kids is has kept us busy, but we're getting the hang of it, I think. Uh, yeah, and then obviously beyond my personal life, it's changed kind of everything about day to day life.
Yeah, I don't want to say my life is almost the same, pre and post, but at times it certainly feels like nothing is different. But yeah, it's surprising. So I think when all this like started to be serious for me anyway, was right when the NBA announced that they were postponing. And you're actually an NBA fan, so I imagine that was probably more impactful than me, who's not.
Yeah, it developed really quickly. It was interesting because maybe a week before they suspended the season, I think LeBron James was asked about playing in front of like no crowds, and he was like, "Oh, I'll never do that." And then a couple days before they actually suspended the season, Golden State made the announcement that their next like home games from now on they're going to play with no crowd, and they never actually had a chance to do that, which is kind of too bad. It'd be interesting to have seen what that looked like. And then yeah, it happened really quickly. There's a full slate of games on, I think it was a Wednesday night, and Utah was set to play Oklahoma City, and that would have probably been like a 9 o'clock tip off, I think. And just before they tipped off, the refs canceled the game because they had just got word that one of the Utah players had tested positive. And then within, I think, hours of that, or an hour or so of that, the NBA had announced that they were suspending the season. From what I understand, that happened in the middle of other games. It just happened all so quickly. And that was a couple days before, I think that was the Wednesday before the Patty Fest tournament. So at that point, we're all expecting it to go ahead. But between that and the Patty Fest tournament, the next day, all the schools were announced to be shut down for 3 weeks, and so many things happened so quickly.
Yeah, and then I think the London tournament was the very next day when they decided they were going to cancel.
Yeah, either the Thursday or the Friday. So we knew when we were at the Patty Fest tournament on Sunday, we had already gotten word about the London tournament. And we were kind of discussing it. And at that point in time, it was kind of like, it didn't seem like an obvious decision. We understood it, but it didn't seem like this was for sure the right decision. And then, like a couple days later, you look back and you're like, of course, like that's the only decision that they could have made right when like the province was like banning gatherings over 50 and so on. So
Yeah, I guess because even that London tournament was only supposed to be this past weekend, even though like, and they
yeah,
announced
exactly.
that they were canceling it, and that feels like a year ago by now. So,
Even at the Patty Fest tournament, there's a bit of discussion. It didn't really go too far, I don't think, but kind of discussion about, oh well, if London's cancelled, maybe a bunch of us will get together and just play crokinole for the day. And that seemed like a real good idea at the time. And then a couple of days later, it's like, no, from everything that the health experts are telling us, like that's not isolating yourself. the way it's kind of changed our approach or our mindset has really quickly changed in a short period of time. And as you mentioned, it feels like it's been forever though.
Yeah. So when all that happened, I was not in the country. Well, I wasn't that far away. I was in Georgia. It was right then on that Thursday when I got an email from Ray Beerling saying that they were going to cancel the London tournament. During that day, like so many things were happening. Like it got declared a global pandemic. I was like, seeing all these other like articles that were saying some pretty crazy numbers, like 30 to 70% of the European population will contract this virus. That was the projected amount over the next 2 years. And then not really seeing much for like North America, but then all those announcements were just like waiting to come out, all the government announcements. I think the stock market took a huge crash on that particular Thursday. And then that's right when I started to think like this World Crokinole Championships, even though it's at that point like 2.5 months away, might not happen this year. And at that point, I started to think like, okay, so the World Championships probably like we may not be able to have it on the first Saturday of June, but I had it in my head for a while. I was like, maybe like we can postpone it to like later in the summer. You just need that the Tavistock Arena, which won't have ice in it until September when the hockey season starts. But as time went on, it kind of was like it became more clear that this will not be a quick fix, and we'll possibly be in this situation for a while. And even once we get out of it, we're not really sure how quickly things will ever return to like quote unquote normal. So it sort of became impossible to have a World Championships for 2020.
Even at work, maybe 3 weeks ago, I was kind of saying, "Oh man, this like worst case scenario for me in my life is that they cancel the World Crokinole Championships." I didn't really think it would happen. It was kind of like, yeah, again, worst case scenario, like that I didn't really expect, and really quickly it became apparent that that's really the only option. I thought maybe the decision could be delayed into May, but maybe a week ago that's what I was thinking. But then just as the scope is kind of being unveiled, how big the scope is, it just became more clear that I just need to call it and make 2021 all the better. And it's kind of a bit sad that 2020, which is supposed to be the year of crokinole for obvious reasons, is going to hell.
Yeah. Yeah, and to give like some like color too on the how the decision came together, like the World Championship Committee like generally just talks at whatever committee meetings we have and not too much outside of that. So when it became clear that this is going to be some issue that we were going to have to deal with, I sent out an email to the committee listing some options. But I said if we decide to postpone or cancel, like that can wait until our next meeting, which was going to be in April. I got some replies back, people just saying their opinion, but in general, everybody just felt, oh yeah, we can wait until April. And then it was only in this past week that things were sort of ramping up, and that other people were sort of reaching out, being like, yeah, I think we should announce that we're going to cancel now. And the whole time I was still like, oh, we can just wait until April, because I was like in the back of my head, like holding out hope that things would improve drastically and that we could still hold the tournament, which was pretty low probability. But it was just wishful thinking. Some people on the committee made some good arguments that I hadn't thought of about like announcing it now is like a little bit more responsible. One, because then people aren't planning trips that will ultimately be in vain, or registering for the tournament and going through that little bit of work, without getting the reward of playing this year. And then it also does our sort of little part to emphasize or underline the importance of this issue and the importance of social distancing, which has become just all the more clear to us in the last couple of days. So yeah, I guess that Patty Fest tournament, I guess we don't have any video of, but might be the last crokinole for a few months.
Yeah, I figure for those who don't know, I partnered with Ray Beerling, who for the last 20 plus years has always partnered with his brother Jason Beerling. So I figure that maybe I broke crokinole by angering the crokinole gods by partnering up with Ray when his real partner should be Jason all the time. So yeah, it's I'm kind of glad that I was able to play in that one last tournament. It was supposed to be the first of, like, I did the calculation that there was like 6 different tournaments in 8 weeks. Two of them were on the same day, the BC Open and the US Open, so you couldn't go to both of those. But like, I was scheduled to go to 5 tournaments in 8 weeks time. We were just ramping up in the crokinole season. Is always the heaviest in the spring. The Paddy Fest was the first one of those, but it ended up being the last also.
So yeah, two things on that. So you just mentioned that 5 events in 6 weeks, 6 and 8 weeks, but you can only attend 5. Yeah, yes, right. So Paddy Fest happened. The London tournament's canceled. Schneider House is canceled. The BC tournament, or sorry, Schneider House. I should say the London tournament is postponed indefinitely. The Schneider House tournament is postponed indefinitely. The BC tournament is canceled. The Extra Pint U.S. Open is canceled. And then I guess the last tournament would have been the Ontario Singles Championship in St. Jacobs, right? Did I get that timeline right? Yeah, which is, I mean, at the moment, not canceled or postponed, but I'm certain that that announcement will come eventually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so.
So the second thing on the Paddy Fest, a few months ago, you partner up with John Conrad and beat Jeremy Tracy and Roy Campbell, and then you swap out your partner, and it's Ray Veerling, and you guys get like pretty thoroughly beat 11-3. So does that suggest that John Conrad is like way better than Ray Veerling? Or
Oh, for sure.
draw?
Ray Veerling is just garbage. No,
I can't remember the last time that guy won a doubles world championship. It was a while ago.
I
for
know.
sure.
Yeah. Well, Jason's carrying the weight in that relationship. That's all I'm saying. No, I mean, the difference in my level of play at from the Ontario doubles to Paddy Fest is just night and day. Where I was playing really well at the Ontario doubles, but this tournament I was playing well until the finals, and then I couldn't find my open 20s, and then was making some other errors too. And Ray wasn't at his best, but he was certainly playing better than I was playing. But I think he was maybe feeling a lot of weight on his shoulders trying to carry me when I wasn't playing that well. But it wasn't just that we weren't playing our best. Like, I've never seen Jeremy and Roy play so well. Yeah, they were just both phenomenal. Roy made a couple errors that they certainly overcame, but was, for the most part, was just spot on with all of his shooting. And then I don't know if Jeremy missed, like, there's maybe 1 or 2 shots that he could have put a nail in our coffin and missed an open 20 or something, but that was just prolonging the inevitable for the most part. Like, he was hitting all his open 20s. His defensive rollouts were amazing. Like, any shot that was needed, he was just playing really well. So
Jeremy is only just recently returned. Well, by the time the Paddy Fest tournament happened, he'd only recently came back from that trip to Philadelphia, right? Or sorry, not Philadelphia, to Boston.
Yeah, PAX East, yeah.
So he's probably carrying in all the momentum from the crokinole promoting he was doing there right into his competitive game too.
Yeah, it's something clicked that I'm not very happy about, because it cost me dearly. But yeah, no, he was playing really well, and even in St. Jacobs Club, he's done well all season, and he's heading into the final night with a 13-point lead over myself, who's in second place. And that the final night of St. Jacobs is being pushed into September, so we have a while to see who actually ends up on top. But he's looking pretty good in that too.
So I acknowledge that all the crokinole stuff is like the smallest potatoes in the world right now, but is the one part that sort of makes like the cancellation for this year kind of suck all that more, was that there was like so much momentum building up to this year's tournament. We had all this extra interest, like internationally. We already had like several international competitors that had registered for the World Championships, and then there was all that stuff that Jeremy sort of like drummed up in like the two different occasions that he's went down to the States to do like a PAX event. Was pulling in sort of like massive amounts of attention for Crokinole, and like our registration numbers like we're already way ahead of where they were last year for the World Championships by this point. So we were on track to, well, we sold out our all of our spots last year, but I guess we were on track to selling out much faster. So it seemed like we had a whole bunch of momentum, which is unfortunately halted in this scenario. So yeah, I was really looking forward to like a pretty big event. The World Championships could have been. I thought, and it's too bad too. Even if it wasn't going to be like one special year, there's quite a few people at the World Championships that I only ever see once a year, which would have been nice to see again. But as you said, like 2021, that's the hope that we'll just pick up that momentum right where we left off.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the momentum of Crokinole. I was kind of thinking about the same thing. And despite the fact that you pronounced the demise of the game a mere 5 or 6 years ago, seems to
Never
really be taken off, and especially in the last year or 2 years. I think a lot of the credit does have to go to, well, one, yourself with all your YouTube videos, and then also Jeremy's board building and the promotions he's done, and the reputation that his boards have quickly acquired is also been very helpful. But there's pockets of Crokinole fanatics popping up all over. There's a quickly developing group in England. There is the Extra Pint group in New York, but also there's some others in New Hampshire and Vermont, and even the online presence. I think you probably noticed too, like even on the NCA Facebook page, there's so much activity and interest, and as you're saying, like a lot of those people or a good number of people from out of country are signing up or interested in the World Crokinole Championships.
I don't go on Facebook a whole lot, and part of what sort of like started to annoy me about Facebook was that it was really hard to like keep up with things. But usually you could trust on like the Crokinole pages not being that populated, so you could actually keep up on things. But yeah, like the last week, 2 weeks, there's just been so much activity. Like every time I like look at Facebook, I see like all these like unread posts or notifications.
Yeah, it's great to see for the most part, and yeah, I'm excited to see what the next World Crokinole Championship ends up being.
Just on the online stuff, just a couple of things to point out. Did you see the attempts at virtual Crokinole that have been going on right now?
I have seen a couple of those. I have not participated.
Yeah.
I think Nick Osmore down in New Hampshire, or Vermont, one of the two, basically in state, whatever. I think he's really been spearheading that, and I know some of the Ian Witt and some of the people over in England have been into it too. I think the first time I saw it, they were actually doing it where they're like taking a picture of the board's positioning and then sending it, which seemed very slow. But now I guess they're using Zoom, which apparently is taking off, to so you can kind of video conference and take a shot and then then your opponent will place the disc where they see it on the board and so on. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see how effective that is. And it's, I guess, kind of making the best out of a tough situation. When you can't get around a board together, you can still have a chance to play against people.
I once had a discussion with somebody where they suggested that as an idea. This is years ago. And I remember when I heard that thinking, I would never do that. And even right now, I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I probably won't try out this virtual Crokinole, but I don't know if this keeps going. I might have to, because Might need to get my fill of competitive crokinole somehow.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm a bit hesitant. I feel like I might be a bit frustrated with just the pace of it, and I figure I can get as just as good practice just like playing against myself. So right now my focus is I'm just trying different shots against myself that I wouldn't normally try in a tournament, and my hope is that I'll kind of discover uh, some a new strategy or a new shot that I would use in certain situations that I haven't. There's a couple that I'm thinking I might be able to pull out in a tournament, but I'm still trying to refine those. So keep tuned.
Oh, that's a nice tease for when we get back into the competitive landscape. Are you would you take a similar opinion to LeBron James though, that given the opportunity to play Crokinole in front of no fans, you would go against that? You have to have an audience.
Oh yeah, I need an audience. I
Yeah.
play for the praise, really.
Yeah, I mean, could you imagine playing Crokinole in front of no fans?
No, for sure. Like I need a couple people in construction uniforms watching me.
Yeah. Yeah, like I think back to when I played John Conrad in the 2017 New York final. If Jeremy Tracy wasn't sitting right there, phew, there's no way I would have played as well.
Yeah, for sure. And that video would also wouldn't have 6 million views.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of the views did come from that aspect of the video. I've been sort of going over or thinking about like things I could do for Crokinole Center in the meantime.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I've had just like a bunch of like always like kept like a really long list of like certain blog ideas, and maybe now I'll actually like look back at some of those ideas and like actually try to write a few. I do have one to tease something coming out in like the next week. I do have the blog of the top 10 Crokinole players of the last decade.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I'm number one on that, I'm guessing.
You're you got a digit next to yours. I believe it's a single digit.
Oh, okay.
That's where I have you on right now. We'll see if that changes by the time I make it public. Um, and then yeah, I was also have like a bunch of like old videos too, which I plan on, I guess, like sort of releasing in lieu of any. We don't have any new Crokinole matches to go over. Having a tough time though. So I tried to commentate a few, and I tried to commentate them like I normally do. So like normally they're all commentated not live, but they're commentated like a few days after the tournament, so I can sort of put myself in the viewer's shoes and pretend like I don't know what the result is. But it's really hard to go back like 7 years and find a video and then do the same thing again. And I'm sure it would be kind of unnatural too, because the viewer, at least when they see a Crokinole match now, may or may not know like the results of the tournaments, or hasn't at least hasn't seen the match, so it's like somewhat interesting. But if I go back and do a match from like 7 years ago, you sort of know probably who won the tournament. So I'm not really sure how to approach it. That's one roadblock that's sort of stopping me from making videos right now. Is I'm just not sure how to approach it from a commentary standpoint.
Yeah, for sure. Even if you bring in this what's happened 7 years, right? Like if you have a match between, I don't know, John Conrad and Justin Slater, do you pretend like they haven't played in the 7 years since, or do you talk about? Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say.
Yeah. So
Now,
once I figure that out, I'll start putting out some videos.
yeah,
Just one last topic I wanted to touch on. So you had said you've been practicing some things, some possible like new shots. Um, and yeah, it's the one sort of unknown right now is like we've we know the World Championships is canceled, unfortunately, for this year. Has to happen. One thing we don't know is what we're gonna do with the National Crokinole Association tour, which I was pretty excited for. That this is sort of the first year where we've had sort of a back and forth of two players at the top of the standings. We've had other cases in the past where two players have been close to each other, but they hadn't really like sort of traded off victories throughout the year. So I was getting like pretty excited that both yourself and Jason Bierling have like risen to the top of the tour this year and have traded off victories in the last few tournaments. And I was like, seemed like we were building to like a pretty climactic finish with 3 events to go. Um, but now that's sort of all in doubt, and we're really not sure what we're going to do with the NCAA tour at this point. So I'm sure that will be decided once there's a lot more clarity on the health situation. But yeah, any thoughts on the NCAA tour and your or potential showdown with Jason Bierling?
Yeah, a couple thoughts. First, I mean, I've been thinking about it a bit because I'm invested in it. Right now, I'm in second place. A couple of things that I think make this year quite interesting is currently with, or how it was going to be with three tournaments remaining. Jason was in first, I was in second, and both of us have never won an NCAA tour before.
And neither of you have been in the top two, I think, either.
Yes. Yeah, and yeah, last year we tied for third with the third most
Right.
amount of points, but we both had 2 wins and I had 2/3, and he had 2 wins, a second and a fourth, and so he won the tiebreaker on account of his second place. But this year also, besides us two, we also had Justin Slater and Ray Bearling with an outside chance of winning if they finished strong on the last 3 events or 2 of the 3 events or whatever the case may be. And it was us four, Jason or Justin, Ray, Jason, and myself, who were top 4 last year. So it was looking like we would be the top 4 again. It was shaping up to be an interesting finish with kind of the same top 4 as last year, but the opportunity of either myself or Jason winning our first tour, but also Ray or Justin being able to come back and win a tour like they've done in the past. So that was interesting. Yeah, it was looking to be an exciting, if not nerve-wracking, finish. So that's too bad. In terms of how we handle it, as I've mentioned, and you've mentioned, Crokinole not the most important thing. So it's not the biggest thing in the world whether that we have a totally fair way of figuring how to finish off the NCAA for the year. That's not the biggest thing in the world, but I am a bit invested in it and that I have a shot. So part of me would like to have three full tournaments remaining, so that gives me more opportunity to catch up with Jason. The other part of me says, well, the less events there are, the more likely I am to at least get top 3. So which I've never done before. So I'm kind of in the middle, and whatever is decided, is gonna help me in one way and make it a bit more difficult for me in another way. And when it all comes down to it, I just need to get one or more victories in the tournaments that are held. So yeah, it'll be interesting to decide or to see what happens, and if St. Jacobs or London or whatever gets postponed to the summer, if we just include those, or in the fall, or do we have, if Belleville, let's say, if that does run in September as usual, do we include that in both, like this current year plus the next year? It's it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Just following the professional sports leagues, they're thinking about ways in which they can finish their regular season and like have their playoffs and then start their next season. What I've heard is like the NHL like will consider whether or not they cancel just the remainder of this season because they don't want to disrupt their next season. The NCAA really doesn't have to worry about that. One, because like we don't have to bow to corporate sponsorships, so we can basically do whatever we want. But two is like we don't have to worry about disrupting the next season of the NCAA because by canceling the World Championships, we've already disrupted it. So now we're sort of free to do whatever we want. And yeah, like I've already said, I wanted to see this like a dramatic conclusion of the tour. So yeah, my desire would be we play 3 more events to cap off this NCAA tour, and we play that whenever and wherever to sort of get it done. So if that's like, I'm hoping that like by the time September rolls around, we're sort of back to normal, and we could have, if Belleville is running their tournament there, then it's just an odd season where Belleville somehow shows up twice on the tour. Like that would be fine with me. Yeah, and then we just pick up the next season, however it comes along. But I mean, in all this sort of social distancing, that's all I'm thinking about is that when that crocodile season gets started up again, and how exciting it could be.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, like I've kind of mentioned before, if this is a good a good time to kind of reevaluate things. If we ever wanted to move the World Championships to be the climax of the NCAA season, this would be a great time to do that, right? Like have this coming season, whenever that does start, have it end next in June 2021 with the Worlds, whether that's a popular decision or that's something people want is another question. But this is a good time to ask and consider those things. One, because things are disrupted enough, and two, because we have a ton of time on our hands.
Yeah, and we need
play
ideas.
Crokinole against each other, so we may as well talk about Crokinole, and maybe that'll like help us fix our cravings for a while.
Yeah, this is the best time for the most lunacy driven ideas we can have for Crokinole. This is a great time for that. Yeah, maybe I'll be spending more time in that Facebook group and getting my dose of strange ideas.
One thing I'm really excited about is I was talking to Jason from the Extra Pint Club, and I was kind of like, I know there's a group in Vermont, New Hampshire, there's you guys in near Albany, New York, and there's a group in Philadelphia and Boston. There's like, if each of those places hold one tournament, you can basically have like an NCAA type, like a regional tour, right? The NCAA tour as it stands now is basically a regional tour, right? Yep. Southwestern Ontario with like upper state New York. Well, we've had BC in the past, but not currently. So, like they could if they had 4, 5, 6 different locations willing to run a tournament, they could basically have a tour. And Jason was saying, oh, I've talked to Nick about that. I've talked to a couple other people about that. That's something we're actually looking to implement. And then I was talking to Ian Witt in England about the same idea, and he's kind of mentioned, that it's crossed his mind that they're like they've had a number of tournaments kind of pop up, quite small tournaments by our standards, but still like people like 16 people coming out, which is great. And if you have 4, 5, 6 of those throughout the year, like they could have like an English tour. And kind of my dream for Crokinole is to me it seems like it's something that starts at the grassroots, right? You have a club or a few people who are really interested in an area, and then it kind of spreads in that area. That's what we've seen with the Extra Pint Club. And like it'd be amazing if you have these different like regional tours sprouting up, and maybe one day then there can be some coordination. And this kind of goes back to what you're saying before about some of the momentum. There's so much momentum in the game now and growth that like who knows what could be happening 10 years down the road.
Yeah, and there should be nobody out there thinking like that they don't have enough people to sort of like run like a club or an event. Because even if you host a tournament with like 10 people, like if you go back to the early years of the NCAA, there were a few tournaments with only 10 people there.
Yeah,
So it's one, it's not like having any sort of like collection of like gathering for Crokinole when it's obviously safe to do so is something that helps grow the game regardless.
for
And
sure.
yeah, and like you could be in a situation that that I thought Crokinole was in like 6 years ago, where I was like, man, we're only getting like about 10 people, like we're and just like sort of looking around being like, well, there's not a whole lot of young people here either, so this may not be around in 5 years. But then end up in a situation where we're at now, where all of a sudden you're getting all this growth from places that you didn't expect before.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Yeah, Extra Pint, the Houston chapter held a tournament maybe the weekend before Patty Fest and had, I don't know, maybe between 12 and 20, maybe around 16 people out. Like that's their first tournament that they've run, and that's a great showing. And yeah, even I think my first St. Jacobs tournament was 2016, and there's certainly less than 30, maybe like 20, between 25 and 30. And then this past year, like last year in 2019, there's there's like 55 people or something. And that's like 10 years into the NCAA, right? Like, so any of these tournaments, if you have like 6, 8, 10 people to start off, that's amazing. And yeah, just be great to see kind of tournaments run year after year and to build that momentum, and you're going to see a lot of people come out. And yeah,
and the other thing is, like, it's only Crokinole, so you don't have to have that many people to run an event. Like it's not like you're trying to kick off like well, to use like a Canadian example, like it's not like you're trying to like run like a hockey tournament where you need like a dozen teams, which involves like needing like almost 100 people that are interested. Like Crokinole tournaments are simple. Like they don't cost excessive amounts of money. You can run them like pretty much from like very little interest and with a very low budget. So, and all you have to do is like share that information online, and all of a sudden, who knows what you might find about people who live close by, or even people who live like pretty far away but are willing to drive like a decent distance just to play in a Crokinole tournament. So
yeah, Ian Witt's his Crokinole map is an interesting thing to check out, to see where all these different people who are interested in the game are, and they're able to kind of connect when they see how close they are to others. And he's seen a huge, from what I can tell, he's seen a huge growth in the Crokinole UK community and Facebook page and all that. So it's great to
yeah,
see.
I enjoy looking at that and just learning things about geography I didn't know before. Like oh, that's where Wyoming is. Like.
There's the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah. Huh. Always thought it was bigger than that, but all right, whatever.
So
Yeah.
New England and England aren't right beside each other.
That is weird. And why do they call them the United States when not even all the states are touching each other? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But anyway, I guess that's pretty good. I feel like it
Yeah.
was enjoyable to at least have this conversation. And I guess we'll find out if it was enjoyable at all to listen to from other people.
Well, we'll find out for sure.
Yeah.